Thanks so much. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Rick Ledwith, it's great to see everyone. And I will call our November 13th Vision Zero Task Force meeting to order at 5:02 p.m. At this point, I'll turn things over to Susan with FHI, who can start to walk us through tonight's agenda. Thank you, Susan.
Thanks, Rick. Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Van Benschoten from FHI Studio. I'm going to kick this meeting off, and we have a lot of material to cover, so we're going to try to move through some of it fairly quickly to allow the maximum amount of time to really dig into the action plan. I'll go through some project updates. We have some new business to talk about, the public meeting that's coming up in December. That's our second public meeting. We're going to talk about the task force role moving forward into implementation, the Safe Streets for All grant award notification, and some feedback, a feedback summary of the Webmap feedback that we received, the survey results, but this is the locational web map that we've got lots and lots of responses to, and had to take some extra time in order to summarize that. We're gonna then go into kind of reconvening where we were a month ago, which is going through the action plan status, and Adam will take on this part of the meeting and we'll walk through where we are now with the action plan based on more thinking, more work, and as well as your input from the last meeting. And then we'll wrap things up with going through some upcoming meetings and milestones, and then open things up for public comment. So quick project updates. Just wanted to remind everybody where we are on the schedule. We are getting very close to the January deadline when the action plan is slated to be complete. By no means does this mean that the work is done, but the plan itself will be done in January. As you put together, a lot of work had been done. A consultant was brought on board in May, and then we started our work in June. We did a lot of catching up, getting our bearings together, looking at some policy and plan reviews, and then moved right into the summertime where you guys did a lot of work, really splitting up into your topical areas and getting the meat put on the bones. And we have continued to add to that in September and October at the last meeting. And now here we are in November. We do have one more public meeting in December, and then in January, we will be wrapping things up. So that's where we are. It's, I was thinking to myself, feels like we've been at this a really long time, but this is actually pretty amazing what we've accomplished in this short amount of time. So thank you all. Next up is one of the things that has happened since our last task force meeting was FHI Studio conducted a road safety audit on Park Road from Prospect to Quaker Lane. This was done October 24th. Oh, excuse me, my phone is ringing. October 24th, and the town was there. Some of the task force members and some community representatives were there. We are close to finishing up the actual report that comes out. This is the written report that comes out of the road safety audit. It will have the safety findings. It will have community concerns and discussions that happened as our team was walking the study area, as well as recommendations for safety improvements. And this will be shared with the task force when it's complete. So that's just work that's been happening a little bit behind the scenes, and that will be shared with you shortly. So on to new business. I'm going to hand things over to Shauna. She's going to talk about the upcoming public meeting, and I believe there's a couple more things to talk about. So thanks. Take it away, Shauna.
Hi, everybody. So we will have our second and final public meeting in a couple of weeks. It's going to be December 6th. That's a Wednesday, 5:30 to 7:30 at the Noah Webster Library meeting room. That's the room that's next to the children's room. We'll make sure to have signage and a couple of people posted at either door. There's two entrances to that room. Based on sort of the flow and what we what we experienced at our first public meeting. We have changed up the format slightly. So we'll have, it'll generally be an open house with different stations for folks to come in, roam around, talk with the task force, talk with the project team, ask questions, and visit some stations with information about the action plan. But we will host a presentation from about 6 to 6:30, and people can come and go as they please. And we just felt that there was a lot of people wanted to have discussions before the meeting got started, and then there was still some interest in having just talking with each other afterwards. So we will host it in that format. The presentation is going to include a Vision Zero refresher. We want to respect the fact that some people might be quite familiar with this process and might have been following us along throughout, and others might be coming to this and it's their first touch point with us. So we want to make sure that they don't feel left behind. We'll just kind of catch those folks up to speed on what has happened and how we got here. We will update them on what we've done over the last several months that Susan outlined. And then we can dive into some of the analytics from the public survey and the Webmap summary. We'll talk a bit about the action plan and how that's set up and how we envision that being rolled out over the next several years. And then we'll talk about how the public can be involved. We want to continue to make sure this is, there's a sense of shared responsibility to make Vision Zero a success. I will note that we have shared a couple of social media posts with Renee and her team to begin sharing. And we also have a digital flyer that you should start to see hopefully around. I can send the PDF and the social media posts to the task force, and you can help amplify this among your communities. That would be very helpful. And then, as we did last time, we hope to ask for some task force support. There are more stations than we have staff, and then we also always appreciate having some people floating around and able to interact with the public, fielding questions and that sort of thing. So we'll send out another email seeing if any of you can help be ambassadors and help speak on behalf of the project. Next slide. And I will pass it over to Rick.
Thanks, Shauna. And as Susan highlighted in her remarks, we've been working together hard at this for the task force itself officially since last February when we started meeting together, and then had FHI and Tool join us a couple of months after that. So, and during this time period, we've been meeting at least monthly, if not more than that. And our task, as we all know, has been to work to develop our Vision Zero action plan, as outlined and tasked by our mayor and our town council. So as we've discussed and will continue to discuss, the plan will have timelines, action plans, deliverables, all set, all to set a goal of 0 deaths and serious severe injuries as a result of traffic crashes by 2023. And to help us manage the accountability of our plan, we would like to continue this task force in some form beyond January of 24. So our thoughts would be to form an advisory committee, a Vision Zero advisory committee. And this committee would be comprised of staff members as well as residents who would oversee the implementation of our action items and deliverables, including an annual Vision Zero report, which would highlight accomplishments of our Vision Zero action plan throughout the year. And that would be presented to the council via standing committee at least once a year, as well as updates throughout the year. So this advisory committee, we envision meeting at least 4 times during the year, and certainly more if needed. And what we would like to do is open it up to this task force for members of the task force who would want to volunteer to serve on this committee. And I know we've asked a lot of everyone to date, at least monthly. But really, we think keeping this task force at a smaller level, potentially, together as an advisory committee will help us to continue to drive the work forward. So as we've talked about many times, this is not going to be something that's the action plans put on a shelf and gathers dust. We will be accountable to delivering zero deaths and zero serious injuries as a result of traffic crashes within 10 years. And a lot of work needs to take place. A lot of work has gone into this. A lot of work is going to take place after we're done in January. And we are committed as a town and organization to seeing Vision Zero through to zero deaths and zero serious injuries within 10 years. So I'll stop there, turn it back to actually open it up to any questions, thoughts, concerns, ideas that the task force had on this. But ideally, we'd love to recruit from our current task force to help us staff the advisory committee, at least for the first couple of years as we move forward. So I'll stop there and turn it over to the committee for any questions, thoughts, concerns that folks had. Bad idea, good idea? I see Ed giving thumbs up. Sandy,
Duane has his green card.
Green, oh yeah, we have our cards. Green card, yellow card, or red card. Can't get mine readily available. Seeing a lot of greens. All right, so that will.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Of course.
So so it's an advisory board that would meet quarterly?
Yeah, exactly. So, or more if needed, but yeah, we would start off at quarterly, Mary.
And so it's taking sort of data and feedback and then writing the annual reports. And then I'm sorry, I think I'm a little clear about like the governance structure and then sort of the goals in terms of accountability for past actions versus visioning and continual change looking forward of that group.
So it'd be a combination of both, but certainly we'll have that action plan to move forward with. And then this advisory committee would ensure that we're meeting our deliverables on an annual basis. So, and we would do that through these quarterly meetings, more if needed. And we would, similar to what we do with our complete streets policy and complete streets report that some folks may be familiar with, but every year we would then develop a annual report that would highlight things that the plan that we've accomplished through that year. So setting the first year of goals, hopefully achieving those deliverables and goals during that year, and then creating an annual report that would highlight those deliverables as well. And then certainly as things need to change or revision or repurpose as we move forward, this committee would be tasked to working together with our staff to ensure that happens as well as we move forward.
Okay, and I should say, you should feel free to tell me, Mary, this is something we should talk about like a month or two from now, because I don't want to hold this up too much, but I'm curious, like, how similar would this be to like the way the ped and bike board, the town's pedestrian and bicycle like advisory committee works in terms of, is it simply making recommendations and then that's it, or?
So that would be part of it, but we certainly can talk more about this as we get closer to our start date. But no, so even beyond that, Mary, because this annually over the next 10 years. So this will be kind of our accountability mechanism to ensure that we're meeting those goals. So, and yeah, like I said, there will be things that may change, recommendations that we as a committee may look to explore further, but at the very minimum, it's making sure that we achieve those goals that we set out annually to get us to Vision Zero within 10 years.
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, Rick, I would just like to add on to this. I mean, there are many communities where these, however you want to sort of think about them and label them, but they become, really important in the implementation process too, and helping you, continue to identify grant opportunities, to continue to help you support, communities that you need to engage with, continue to, really not just be, Rick, I appreciate the emphasis on accountability, right? But it's also in sort of partnership and support and providing as much the way that you all have participated to date, really being, active in moving things forward.
Thanks, Adam. Any other?
So then I think,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, are we ready to move on? I think we were going to ask the same question.
I had one quick thing. Rick, if it's all right with you, I had a quick question. If you guys can hear me.
Yeah.
Hi everybody, it's Jay. I had noticed in the Vision Zero action plan that there was a conversation about the future sort of, I guess, governance or structure of the Vision Zero task force, and of course without the consultant playing a central organizing role. It seems to me that there are a couple possibilities for the way that this advisory committee or commission could work with town staff to sort of organize the things going forward. And one way would be for a town staff person to be sort of nominated or appointed to take on the role of the consultant. And then also there's been conversation about possibly funding a position that would be, that would sort of provide that role to sort of convene the meetings and coordinate between town staff and volunteers in the community. Do I have those possibilities right? And if so, would this volunteer body, interact with town staff and with that point person moving forward in the absence of the consultant?
Yes, great point and question, Jay. So yeah, so this advisory committee would be working with our staff. We have started to discuss the possibility of adding, when we finish what we started out to do and developing the action plan, certainly there are going to be a lot of deliverables for us as a staff, for our engineering department, when we're looking at redesign of streets and things like that. So we've talked about the possibility of bringing on a Vision Zero engineering type staff person who would be tasked with working closely with the advisory committee. So advisory committee would, if that's in fact what we do, we'd also probably be talking about the potential of working with a consultant as we move forward as well. So those are a couple of things that we still need to determine, find funding for, but those are just a couple of the things that we would do with the advisory committee. Other questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, I think Duane, you were going to talk a little bit about, can you back up? Yeah, we haven't talked about the grant award notification. Duane, were you going to talk to this a little bit?
Yes. Yes, thank you, Susan. Good evening, everyone. Duane Martin, Director of Community Development. So I'm just going to go over the SS4A grant award, which SS4A is Safe Streets and Roads for All. It was a grant that was put out by the U.S. Department of Transportation, and the town seized the opportunity, working with Shauna Kitzman. Shauna and I and others put together the application with, I think it was a 2 or 3 week turnaround. It was pretty quick. This goes back to July of this year. We were able to get everything in time, and somewhat surprising, we received positive news last month that the town of West Hartford was going to receive this grant, which is fantastic news. So the grant is a speed management pilot program, and it's meant to demonstrate another tool that the town would be able to use to combat speeding in West Hartford. And the idea is we would set up a program. It would be a trial for approximately 18 months, working with a vendor that's experienced in this type of a program and crafting it to meet the needs of West Hartford. We would use the Vision Zero action plan information and data to decide exactly where to locate up to 15 camera locations in town. And we would then report at the end about how successful or how unsuccessful the pilot program is. This is getting a lot of interest, including from the press. This is exclusively a speed management pilot program. So at the moment, although the town is interested, it does not include red light running at signalized intersections. It's just speed management. There's a lot of legwork that needs to happen in order for us to launch this program. We do not have the official grant award yet. That's the first thing. Once we receive it, we need to get the agreement executed through the town council and allocate funding. The total grant amount was, I'll use round numbers, about $840,000. That's the total grant amount. And it's split up 80% federal funded, 20% local or town funded. So $670,000 is federal funded and about $170,000 would be the town's required match. And that would all be set up through the town council. Once the funding is in place, we now need to create a program and demonstrate that program to the state. And we have not yet received the guidance from the State Department of Transportation to know exactly what we need to do to launch this program, but we should learn soon. I believe the state was obligated to provide information by the end of this calendar year. Once we have that information, we have the agreement, we can then start to solicit vendors to help with the program, give us guidance, and set the program up with the police department. The grant did include bringing on staff, particularly a police officer, to help with this program. This would be a new initiative, if you will, and we need to have a sworn officer review the videos and determine whether or not a fine is applicable, and then work through that process to administer the fine to the registered owner of the vehicle. The cameras that would be set up throughout town would have signage to warn motorists that there is video being used to enforce the speed limit. And we are only recording the license plates. So we're not looking to get video or photos of the driver or what's going on in the car. It's just exclusively whether or not they were speeding, where they're located, and what the license plate is. And the police would issue a fine, if appropriate, to the registered owner of the vehicle. There would also be a process that the town would have to abide by as far as administering the fines and offering an appeal process should that make sense. This all needs to be set up through ordinances, and that's all part of the legwork that I'm referring to. But once it is set up and demonstrated and approved by the State Department of Transportation, we should be able to proceed. I would estimate that we would be able to complete all of this legwork, by the middle of next year. It will take some time, unfortunately, to go through, and we might be, if not the first, one of the first communities in Connecticut to be going forward with this. So there might be a little bit of initial delay, if you will, with the DOT reviewing our plan. But that is it in a nutshell. A lot of people have been asking me where those locations are. We have not established those yet. We are not there yet. So I will pause there. If anybody has any questions, I will entertain those. Thank you.
Duane, this is Ed Pollack. I have a question for you. If these cameras are going to be at fixed locations and it's going to be signage to announce that the cameras are there, are you concerned that drivers will quickly learn where to moderate their speed and slow down appropriately so that they don't get the ticket, and then once beyond that camera, they just pick right back up to, the way above posted speed limit speed?
Thank you, Ed, for the question or comment, that is a viable concern. You know, we've seen that with our driver feedback signs as an example. They do have a period of time in which their effect or benefit is measured. I fully believe that there will be a time where this is an effective tool for us to use. But yes, I think that there will be a certain amount of time where people will get used to it. The town will probably have some flexibility in being able to locate these as to how long or effective they are. It's a little bit of a catch-22 because this isn't intended to be a revenue generator. It's a safety program to slow people down. So if we do put them at areas that have been a problem to keep speeds down, and that's what we see, then that's great. But yes, I do agree with you that there is a limitation over the period of time in which they will be beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you.
Duane, Ed, we can offer up, as we normally do at the PD, if we see that happening beyond the zone, we can put a police officer after that. And, you know, if they think they're going to outsmart the signs, we'll have a police officer doing speed enforcement, if that's appropriate. That might help.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on?
I had a question if Ed's finished. Ed, you all set?
Yeah, yes, I am. Thanks, Jay.
Okay, great. A couple quick notes. I worked on this legislation to create this program, and one of the things that that the legislation does, and I'm wondering, Duane, if you guys have had any direct, sort of guidance from DOT yet about how this works, but you mentioned that it's not supposed to be a revenue generator, but it is supposed to direct funding for the fines into traffic calming and traffic safety programming, including infrastructure changes. So that's something that I think is going to be really positive moving forward. And then also, my understanding from Commissioner Euclid is that the towns that choose to participate could rely on DOT for sort of a template ordinance. Of course, every town has its own set of ordinances and regulations, but the language would be suggested by DOT for how to manage the program. So that's something that might help a little bit on the legwork side. And I don't know if DOT is ready to produce that document along with their other guidance, but I think that's something that we can expect.
Thanks, Jay. I'll comment quickly. We have not received any guidance yet. There is a webinar I'm attending tomorrow, which should give or shed some light on that. We should be getting the guidance at some point in the near future. We would gladly take any template that the DOT has to offer to give us a head start, certainly craft it to meet the needs of West Hartford. So I believe that was your question. Did I miss anything? I think that was it. Okay, anybody else have a question? Okay, looks like we're good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Duane. Okay, so several months ago, we administered the Webmap. As you recall, we shared this throughout the community. It was quite popular. We received about almost 1,800 comments. And that was a lot of data to sort through. So it's taken us a little bit of time, but we've done it. Working through all of the comments, we identified 15 core themes that rose to the surface that encapsulate what the community is concerned about when they think about roadway safety. This is the list of themes that we identified. I recognize that it's quite long, but it ranges from, making sure your children have safe ways to get to and from school with their families, having considerations for older adults, thinking about maintenance and management of greenery and shrubs and snow and ice. So it really ran the gamut, and I think people put a lot of time and thought into how they think about and communicate their concerns. If you go to the next slide, please, Adam. I just wanted to kind of help sort through what topics rose to the top when we did our data analysis. The first one with the most comments and likes from the web map are design of our roadways, intersections, and signals. The second hottest topic was walking and safe crossings. And the third is speed. So I think that really plays well into the town's demonstration project funding that they've been notified of. And I think speed continues to be a top concern among stakeholders, and for good reason. If you don't mind going to the next slide, please. So what we did was we developed heat maps for each of those themes. The heat map that is shown here reflects all themes, but for each of the 15, we did a different map of its own to kind of understand where the public has thoughts on location-based safety. And the heat maps reflect the quantity of how many comments or likes we received by the theme. I'm happy to provide deeper technical details upon request. It gets a little nerdy very quickly, but if you don't mind going to the next slide, Adam. One of the core things that we found helpful to this analysis was understanding where the heat maps and the community's comments relate to our high injury network. So if you look at this map, the darker and thicker red lines, so I can point out like Farmington Ave and South Main, North Main Street is always a hot topic. That intersection came up again and again, but also you'll see like Trout Brook, Mountain Road, Fern Street, Albany Ave. That shows where there were more comments from the community. And then the purple lines are our high injury network that we have created over the last couple of months. So that sort of helps identify where there is overlap and where there are some deltas in where crashes have occurred and where people have concerns. So this analysis will inform our Vision Zero focus areas, and it'll also inform our proposed. I am going to hand it over to Adam as he gets into the action plan, because he will dive into how this will play out and how this impacts our action plan and the towns where they should focus limited resources over the next 10 years. Adam?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Shauna. So before we get into that, I want to see if anybody has any questions for Shauna about the web map and the feedback before we jump into the action plan and the how it's going to be used. I don't think I can see everybody. I can see a lot of people, so jump in, or otherwise I'll keep going. Cool. Oh. All right. So with regard to the action plan, I'm going to walk you through a little bit of where it all sits and sort of how all of your feedback has shaped the recommendations. So thank you all for attending our in-person meeting. I really love to see all of the green cards out there and all of the support. I think it really is a testament to all of your hard work on this plan and sort of putting together, and we're kind of continuing to build off of that. So since the last time that we met, we've been reviewing your scoring and your comments. We've been meeting with the different departments to understand the implementation of some of these action items. And we also reflected a little bit back and went back to some of the case studies and best practices that you all reviewed at the beginning, and some more to try to think through a little bit the how to respond to some of your comments and questions. Before I get into that, though, I do want to say that we've thought a little bit about the document and how it's going to be organized. And one thing that we started to get a little concerned about once we started to put it all together was how big the action tables were going to get in the front of the document. And so what we are recommending is that the main plan, the sort of front part of the plan, will include the action, its priority, who the lead and supporting entities are, and what those obstacles are, whether they're legislative or funding or staffing. But that all of the other information will be in an Excel document in the appendix. It'll still be part of the plan. So it'll still be adopted as part of it. You're not losing any of it, but we're sort of allowing some of the more technical details to follow the back and leaving some of the more kind of core details up front in the document. So before I go on that, any questions about that approach? Yeah, Mary.
Hi. Yeah, I can understand how it's probably a huge document. I'm wondering, this summer we looked at a bunch of plans from other cities, and I found that really helpful to visualize what we're talking about sometimes. I'm wondering if you have an example of what you're talking about from another town or city's Vision Zero action plan.
Yeah, I can bring some of that up, and actually we're going to kind of walk through some things in a little bit that will help maybe help illustrate that a little bit more. But yeah, I think the one, if you want to kind of go back and reference, is the now I'm blanking on it right now. And I'll just look it up really quickly. The Des Moines action plan. That was one that sort of summarized a lot of it into a sort of relatively short one. Another one to look at is, which you all did not review, but I think did a good job of this, is the city of Philadelphia. Okay. So I'm going to keep moving here because we do have a lot to do. Another thing that we've sort of done along the way here is try to simplify some of the actions. We haven't removed any language from what you all have said, in a sense that we had some actions that were more like paragraphs than statements, and so we thought that it would be worthwhile to include a column in the action plan that just includes additional notes. So this is an example here where there were both of these, the action and the additional notes were in the original action, and it just made it overly complicated. So the action will become conduct an annual review of the Vision Zero Safe Design Action Plan, and then the additional notes identify sort of what should be identified in that review. And we think that makes it a little bit simpler. It's going to make it a little bit easier for people to follow along, and again, move some of the content into a place that's more relevant for maybe the task force or the implementing entities, and less relevant to people who are just trying to get an understanding of what the core recommendations are. The next thing that we've done here is we took all of your input and we created a priority system here, which is sort of high, medium, and low. And I don't know, can you all see this? Okay, I know it's a little small on my side, but we not only prioritize the actions, but we also prioritized the strategies. And so this is going to be in an Excel document. And one of the great things about that is, if you're at all familiar with Excel, it means that you can filter the recommendations and be able to see all the high priority, for example, actions in a simplified sheet, and then you can unhide them. And I think will make it a lot easier for you all to work with the information in the action plan. Another important change here that I want to talk to you about is, in having a conversation with some of the departments, one of the things that they brought up was concern about start times and end times, and if something says that it should be, started in a certain year or, finished in a certain year, what does that mean? And one suggestion that we got was that a Gantt chart, something that, identifies when something should be initiated, identify when things are sort of working and when things are going to be complete over a sort of time period that would go to 2030, with a column that would identify actions that extend beyond 2031, would be really helpful. And this could be something that you could continue to update as you go. You could provide more details as things either get accelerated or pushed back based on what you learned during the implementation. And then along with that would be the lead and supporting entities. So I just wanted to see if anybody had any questions or thoughts on this approach to the timeline, which I think is in the Des Moines example that we looked at earlier, and I think does a little bit better job than talking just broadly about timelines in terms of making things a little bit clearer about implementation. Thanks, Mary. I appreciate that. So I'm going to keep moving along on this. Another thing that happened is when we were starting to talk about the implementation of all of these actions, we realized that in the design section specifically, there were 15 pretty big design actions. Everything from reviewing all mid-block crossings to pedestrian wait times to, thinking about automated pedestrian detection, signalized intersections, restriping roadways, removing parking prohibitions, thinking about road diets. This is just a sample of all the actions in that 15. I mean, there's just a lot that we were talking about. And there was some concern among some of the departments and thinking about, well, what does this act is that the language was a little bit squishy or a little bit soft on the implementation side. There was a lot of review, explore, identify, and there was some concerns amongst all of you that sort of like, hey, what does this actually mean? When are things going to get built? When are things actually going to get implemented? So we thought about that a little bit, and we wanted to sort of start to think more critically about how to do that. So some of the things that we found was, we agree with you that there was more emphasis on review and study than on implementation. And when we started to dig into the action items, there was a fair amount of overlap around like, well, if you're reviewing all the mid-block crosswalks, does that also overlap with the signalized intersections? And how does that relate with the automated pedestrian detection? The other thing that we were sort of started to uncover was that there wasn't a real strong tie to the Vision Zero priority network. And then again, that there was just a lot of actions. And so what we are proposing is a solution to this is to start with, instead of trying to tackle all of these different topics or issues all independently, is that we look at safety and safety audits or assessments. And the recommendation would be that the town do road safety audits and or safety assessments of areas identified on the Vision Zero focus areas. And that the town would be required to identify all those same issues that we had identified in the actions. So frequent vehicular parking in bicycle facilities, excessive pedestrian wait times, gaps in the sidewalk networks, improper sight lines, all of the other things that were sort of identified as safety concerns in all of those actions. And so what this would do is sort of consolidate all of those major topics that everybody had identified and really focus the attention on the Vision Zero focus areas. The other thing that you are sort of thinking about doing and want to talk to you all about is then tying those safety concerns to potential countermeasures, things that we were already tasked with developing for the town as part of this project. So there'd be a real clear tie between what is the safety concern at, that you are identifying in the road safety audits with potential solutions, potential countermeasures to addressing those issues. Sorry, I've got and that at the end of each safety audit or safety assessment, the town would be required to develop conceptual plans to sort of help build community buy-in, and then identify quick build solutions, short-term solutions, and long-term solutions, and then to update the action plan accordingly. And so what that would do is that would mean that we'd simplify the actions, right? So it becomes very clear how many safety audits or assessments the town needs to do every year. It would give the town very clear guidance on what are the topics or what are the issues that need to be addressed in those safety audits. And those are minimums, not maximums. If other things came up in those safety audits, they could certainly be addressed. And then a requirement that things essentially be then added to the action plan coming out of those safety audits or safety assessments. And then finally, what we are looking at doing is not just talking about the Vision Zero focus areas generally, but starting to talk about a prioritized network. And this is where the survey input and the web mapping input starts to get involved in the process. So what we are suggesting is that about 8 miles of the Vision Zero focus area segments get identified as urgent segments. So those are areas that are on the high injury network, have high survey response numbers, and are in transportation equity zones. So these are basically segments that check all of the boxes. The high areas would be areas that are on the high injury network. So again, identified as part of the data analysis, and either were high in the survey or were in a transportation equity zone. And so what this does is it incorporates that public input and says, hey, if a lot of people responded to this, then it should be prioritized. At the same time, it also recognizes that the survey is going to miss communities that aren't necessarily always empowered to participate in things like a web mapping survey, and that equity has been identified through this entire process as a priority. So it gives equal weight to sort of the equity component and the community engagement component. Medium segments would be ones that are on the high injury network or were on the high survey and transportation equity zone. So if it didn't come out as part of the data analysis, but it was in the transportation equity zones, and there were a lot of survey responses to it that said, hey, this is a critical area, then it sort of rose up into this medium category. And finally, low would be places that were identified on the survey. I think Parker pulled out, they were in the top 90th percentile of the survey responses, but not on the high injury network or the transportation equity zones. So again, sort of areas that are community identified, the data analysis. Overall, I think what this does is sort of create a clear prioritization for the Vision Zero focus areas and centers equity and public input into that prioritization process. I think it brings a much more holistic approach to the sort of safety analysis. It doesn't put the town in this position where it's trying to manage 15 different studies of 15 different interrelated topics and trying to figure out what is, you know, the priority there, but really focuses on priority locations and then identifying known or common issues in those locations. It puts the town in a really good position for grant funding because those RSAs, those road safety audits, are, you know, nationally recognized tools for identifying safety issues and identifying countermeasures. So, you know, it really positions the town well to start to go after external money. And then it simplifies the strategy for the town to follow, which I think also helps to support accountability. When you have, you know, all these different studies happening and all these different sort of topics that are supposed to be addressed, it's easy to kind of lose things in the weeds. And this really says, no, we know where our first 7 miles are, and we know what we need to do on those first 7 miles, which is to start to really dig into them, identify the issues, and start rolling out programs for quick build, short-term, medium-term, and long-term improvements. So that was a lot that I just dropped on all of you. I'm happy to kind of go back through these slides, but I wanted to see if anybody has any questions or comments before we go forward. Yeah, Mary.
Could you go, I guess the quick build had a 1 to 2 year timeline.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe we're not talking about the same thing. I thought that quick build was sort of, when we were initially in these Vision Zero discussions way back when, there was this idea that the town could, you know, after a crash, very quickly try some interventions to see them work, and this idea of the sort of Vision Zero roots of short-term interventions to see if they make a difference. And that doesn't quite, I guess I'm not seeing how that's the one. I don't know if I'm talking about the same, if that's what you mean by that 1 to 2 year timeline, because that seems a little bit longer than that initial thing.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about that and think about that, you know, in a little bit more detail. I mean, I think the reality is that the process for quick build solutions, even though they are quick build, I mean, they really are. We're talking about quick build within the framework of infrastructure investments, and that to the extent that they can be, you know, some of them may be things that, you know, when I'm talking, maybe it's 0 to 2 years is a better way to think about it. They may be things that can get out and you can do in the first 3 months, but they may be ones, for example, that need a little bit more planning work, need a little bit more community engagement work, and may take a little bit more time to move forward because they may be a little bit more permanent, for example. But I'm hearing what you're saying about the being a little bit clear about what quick build might mean here. Would something like a 0 to 2 year time horizon feel more appropriate to you?
I don't want to monopolize the conversation time, but I think there's 2 issues, right? One of them is 3 issues. What do you mean? I guess, what do we mean by quick build? The second is the timeline. The third is this bigger question of sort of, are we cutting off avenues that we in this group thought were some of the avenues the town would take? To me, that is the bigger question. And from your answer, it sounds like we're not. And so that's good to hear. I just want to make sure that we are still leaving all of our options open.
Yeah, I think that to be really clear about this, what we're really talking about is a sort of rethinking of how to approach this, and a rethinking of how to organize things. We're not taking anything off the table here. So yes, I think that's a fair assessment to say that we're not taking any potential countermeasure off the table as part of this.
Then yeah, I think that 0 to 2 years would be really nice, just to keep options open.
Yeah. Ed, do you have a question?
I'd like to make a comment.
Yeah.
So, Adam, you presented a lot of information there, and we have to digest that. But my observation is that I think it's brilliant to use the road safety audits as a tool to integrate the priority framework that you described, or as modified as needed, so that we're conducting the RSAs in a prioritized fashion, integrating relative actions that should be considered during the conduct of those road audits, and then as well considering the community input that was provided on that road corridor that you're going to be evaluating. I think it really provides an opportunity for creating a really useful structure for the road audits. So you're not just kind of wandering around and observing conditions, but doing so in a really intelligent and focused fashion. So I fully support that, at least conceptually.
Yeah, great. That's really great to hear. Yeah, I think you're hitting on the idea that we had here, which is also that, as you start to do more of these, RSAs, I think you're going to start to find, recurring conditions and recurring issues, and that you're going to be able to, in some ways sort of standardize these RSAs so that they move a little bit faster. I'm not saying that's going to happen in the first year or two, but as you do more of them and get better at them, you may be able to pick up the pace a little bit as you move forward. And, one of the things that we've been talking to Duane about this and making sure we're going to need to think a little bit critically is these RSAs are time intensive. They do take resources. They are going to take, getting people out there and coordinating that. So, I would really consider it and encourage you all to think about this as something that's going to probably take a little bit of a startup time to get working and moving, and you're going to have to work the kinks out after a couple of them, but we've already some work as part of that is part of this work, and so once you get a little bit better at it, I think it's going to move really smoothly.
Yeah, and by the way, just to Mary's point about quick build, you could integrate that into the RSA planning as well, so that during the course of that RSA, you will discuss and consider, appropriate potential quick build options right out there on the corridor. So I think it has great potential. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's the advantage of sort of tying the countermeasures to the safety concerns and giving you all sort of a framework to think about it. It doesn't mean that you have to use those countermeasures all the time, and you may come up with different solutions along the way that are appropriate, but you can have it. You're a little bit ahead of the game even when you start.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or things that people would like to discuss before we move on? So, what I'm going to do then is that after this meeting, you will get a PDF of the updated action plan. It's going to identify all the topics that should be addressed in the road safety audit, the countermeasures that we pulled out of the action plan and are now going to put into an action plan, into a countermeasures document. There were also a couple of actions that were taken out for, quite honestly, redundancy purposes. You'll also see in that document some edits that I made to the language in red, just to be perfectly transparent. I want to make sure everybody has a chance to see where things changed and evolved. And that what we're going to be asking you to do is over the course of the next week to review those documents, and especially the action plan, to see if there are any things that you have any comments or concerns about, and to get that to the Vision Zero email address so that we can incorporate them and start rolling out the full action plan with all of the supporting documents and building out that Excel sheet in earnest over the next couple of weeks. So any questions about that, you'll get an email tomorrow about that.
Adam, sorry, can you restate when you want to have their comments by?
Yes. Can we say 6 a.m. on the 20th? You get all weekend and into you even actually, you know what? I'm not going to be up at 6. 8:30 a.m. You'll have all weekend in the morning on Monday to review and get us any thoughts. Again, I don't think you all are going to see a whole lot change. I just want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to review it and make sure that nothing was sort of lost in the transition from these two approaches. Great. Ed, is your hands just still up? No worries. I can do it for you, I think. So there you go.
Thank you.
All right. So I think now we can talk about sort of upcoming meeting and milestones.
Yes, and I think this picture is one of my proudest achievements of this presentation yet. So next slide, please. Thank you. Yep, as mentioned, we have the public meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. You will start to see communications about this. We've also we want to post some flyers around the library itself, and I will send out the materials for you to share with your communities or your social media followers. We would really appreciate that. This was originally scheduled for December 11th, but given that we want to have a little bit more time to digest any feedback that we gather at the public meeting, we felt that this was just simply too short of a turnaround time. It only gave us a couple of business days after December 6th. So we're giving you a little bit of a breathing room, a little bit of a holiday break, and we will reconvene on Monday, January 8th. This date should be on previous calendars. We had already held this date earlier in the planning process. So we'll plan that for Monday, January 8th, 5 to 7 at Town Hall. And then in terms of the consultant team, working with Duane, Greg, and Rick, we will be presenting to the Town Community Planning and Economic Development Group, CPED, and making sure that we get approval and buy-in from the town. That date is, as I understand it, Duane, still TBD, but hoping for it to be scheduled for January. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know if Rick has a confirmed date yet, but I want to say we were looking at January 17th, but I don't know if that's been determined.
Okay.
It has not been confirmed yet, but that's our target date, Shauna.
Okay, great. And so just for the task force's, information, that will essentially hopefully mark the end of the action planning process, and then the town will roll into the implementation process. Next slide. I wanted to draw your attention to an upcoming event. The state of Connecticut is hosting the first World Day of Remembrance for victims of traffic violence. This is a national event. There will be people convening at Bushnell Park this Sunday, 1 to 3. I included a link to details in this presentation, which we will post to the Vision Zero webpage after the meeting. Wanted to also make sure you stay tuned to the bicycle facility plan update, which will be starting in earnest in early 2024. And then last but not least, thank you as always for all of your work and contributions. We really appreciate it. And I hope you have a happy and healthy Thanksgiving with your family and friends. Next slide. I'm not sure if there's any members of the public, but if so, this is the portion of our meeting where we're opening up to public comment. Sandy?
I just have a question or clarification, I guess, regarding the red light running. So are there still plans to try to incorporate that in the future? I just missed that part. Is it just something that can't happen immediately? I just want to kind of see what the plan is for red lights.
I can respond. It's Duane, and then Rick, if you have additional information, obviously feel free. So that this is not like speeding. We in West Hartford experience red light running like a lot of communities. Seems to be getting worse as time goes on. So we are concerned with it, and it is something that we wish in the future to address. As far as the SS4A grant application goes, it was a lot simpler, and we felt as though we would have a better opportunity to be awarded the grant if we just focused on speed management as opposed to mixing speed management and the red light running. So I believe, speaking on behalf of the town, red light running is something that we're interested in combating. With camera enforcement, we're just not quite there yet.
Yeah, I would agree with exactly what Duane said, and it will be something that we're going to learn a lot as we're moving through this process with the speed enforcement cameras, and we look to learn a lot from the DOT over the coming weeks as well. And, hopefully, being set up with and up and running with the speed enforcement cameras will allow us to pivot pretty quickly to a red light enforcement program as well. But yeah, we will definitely be going down that road sooner versus later.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi there. This is Anna Asa, and I'm a West Hartford resident. I've got a quick question.
Sure.
So I apologize if this was covered. I wasn't able to join sooner, but I've seen other communities who have adopted Division 0 do certain things that are kind of temporary to test out and get community feedback, like using planters or bollards to narrow roads and provide some kind of physical protection for pedestrians and bike lanes. I was curious whether West Hartford's contemplating any kind of, temporary low-cost kind of pilot tests in advance of doing any big infrastructure projects.
Thanks for your question. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, Anna, that's a really great question. That was actually a little bit of the conversation that Mary and I were having earlier, if you were on that call. So the term we're using for that is called quick build solutions, and those are things exactly what you're saying. They may be the reason why we're using quick build and not temporary is because sometimes quick build can be more permanent. It doesn't have to necessarily be something that is temporary, but it does include demonstration projects, which are short term. They can be everything from a day to a month to a season, to even just as you're saying, like planters that get out there and sort of protect areas for an indefinite period of time. So it's a really good question, and it's certainly something that this task force is looking at and considering as part of the action plan.
Thanks, Adam. No, I'm happy to hear that. And I live in Elmwood off of New Brinton Ave, and so I'm going to come out here and say I want some demonstration projects in my neighborhood. And I think having it on weekends and maybe paired with community events is a good way to get neighbors on board with a project. Right where I live, if you've seen Frank Pepe's on New Brinton Avenue, that's like right across the street from where I live. There are a couple of really underutilized parking lots near where I am that I think would be great spots for farmers markets or markets in general that could pop up over a weekend during the springtime. And I think that's a great excuse to narrow the road, for a quick demonstration project and have there be to some other reason that to give residents for narrowing the road is, we're doing this to make it easier to access this cool new farmers market or something like that, or a cool, a block party or a food truck festival or something like that.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments from the public or task force or questions? No?
All right.
Okay. Yeah, on behalf of our team, we really thank you for your time and look forward to, we'll share the document that Adam stated, and it's due at, well, he gave you an extension from 6 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. on Monday. What is it, the 20th? I'm not looking at my calendar.
It is the 20th, yeah.
Okay. And then we will hope to see you on December 6th, and I'll also send out an email again, seeing if any of you are interested in being an ambassador. And even if you're not interested in being an ambassador, we hope you can all attend if your schedules allow. So thank you so much and have a great evening.
Thanks all.